Hey, parents who worry about your little ones, who worry, are they eating enough? Are they eating right foods? Are they eating at the right time? Am I doing everything right? Oh my goodness. Oh, friends, we put so much pressure on ourselves as parents to get it all right. And that is why in this episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector, where we strive to connect you parents who just want to raise healthy kids with the experts who have the information you need, I'm so honored to host Edwena Kennedy. She's a dietitian and a mom from Canada, and her mission is to take that pressure off, to give you the confidence to feed your kids and not worry so much. Thank you so much for hanging with us today, Edwena.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Edwena tends to focus on the toddler group most of all, but hey, we all know 8-year-old picky eaters who act like toddlers. So I know that a lot of the strategies we're going to talk about today apply to all sorts of ages. Let me give you your official introduction, and then we're going to jump in because the questions are intense today. Edwena Kennedy is a registered pediatric dietitian from Halifax, Nova Scotia, which means you might hear an A in the conversation. And I'm from Michigan, and we pull the A's as well. So this is gonna be kind of fun. And Edwena loves to help parents raise healthy little eaters with confidence. She always felt that getting information on feeding and nutrition for babies was so complicated. Even as a nutritionist, she's like, I'm supposed to know this stuff. But now she has over 10 years experience in the pediatric world of nutrition and feeding, and using that plus her hands-on experience with her two kids who are now 10 and 12, she wants to show parents firsthand that raising healthy eaters easily and confidently is totally mission possible. She created My Little Eater as a simple, straightforward way for parents to get the information, guidance, and support they need to take their child along the entire feeding journey in the healthiest way possible. Love the balance, love the mission. We're all about connection, confidence, and creativity for our kids here at Kids Cook Real Food. But we parents, we need a little confidence in our choices too. So Edwena, tell us how you fell in love with nutrition and how did you dial in your focus on kids?
Yeah, so I started off in the nutrition program or actually about a year after having my first son. So at that point, things were going well. I didn't overthink things. I kind of just, did what my doctor told me, did what my mom told me. Things were going okay. I
Yeah.
didn't have any issues, but I did always love nutrition. That was something that I loved personally, growing up. I'd say from the age of like 14, 15, I was super obsessed with it in general. Of course, after having kids, you're always, your mind frame shifts and you're thinking about them and you're thinking, how
Yeah.
can I help them get the best nutrition? So I entered the program, and again, all was going great until I had my second son, and again, things were going okay. And then one day I felt like they woke up, literally got out of bed, and I served them a meal. And I kid you not, it was the exact same time that both of them started refusing their meals. I don't like this. They only wanted, I remember, chicken nuggets, hot dogs, pizza. Like probably like the most iconically, fast food or not good for you
Right.
foods, like those kids' foods. That's what they asked for. That's what they wanted. And I was like, okay, I have to deal with this, but I had no idea how. And I had certain, instincts about what I thought was right and what I thought was good. But my husband had totally different ideas about what he thought should happen. And so we would argue, we would bicker, and we would try different things. And I was like, no, this has got to stop. So I've got to figure this out. And at this point, I hadn't learned anything in school, about really childhood nutrition. There's a little bit that we go through, at least in our program. There is a life cycles class. It was great, but it's more like, oh, how much iron does your baby need, and how many milligram or how many grams of fat. But it doesn't say anything about what to do when your toddler refuses the meals you give them, or what do you say when they do this. So that was when I started looking for answers. And I remember my husband and I bickered a lot about like kids food.
Mm.
I remember he said to me, like, Edwena, there's obviously, like, this is obviously why they're not eating. You're not giving them kids food. Like, they don't want to eat this. And I was like, no, that is not true. I just knew deep down in my gut. I was like, no, there is definitely no way that I'm going to be giving them separate meals or things that, again, are more kid friendly. I just didn't agree with that concept. And so as I started digging into the research, it took a long time. It took a lot of like trying to decipher different messages. And of course, when you go online, you see conflicting messages here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out what's sound evidence and what's just experiential kind of evidence. And, all this kind of thing. And so I basically dissected it all. But again, I tweaked and I tried and I did all the things on my kids. And I found a basic process that was working really well. And that's when I started testing it out with my clients.
Nice.
And it eventually, I got it down pat and it started working very, very well. But I will say that my big thing at this point was I was kind of a generalist at the time in nutrition. I was, helping. So keeping in mind, this is over like a period of 2-3 years. I was testing and tweaking and trying. And when I would counsel clients, I was kind of like, I was doing a little bit of everything, but it wasn't until I went through this experience as a mom and as a dietitian at the time, then thinking I should really know how to do all this. I've been trained and I still found it so incredibly hard. So I couldn't even imagine the struggle and the confusion that other parents would be going through who didn't go through that education process or who didn't even have the time to sift through everything online and ask and tweak and try. And so that was when I decided I'm definitely going to start specializing in this. And I really, really want to help other parents get that confidence and just simplify this process for them, because we've all got a million and one things to worry about as parents. I don't want to make feeding, another one for them. So that was kind of how it all started.
Wow. I mean, that's so powerful because you're right. Like we non-nutritionists, non-dietitians, we still have to figure out what to feed our kids. And we're starting with even less knowledge than you. So thank you for what you do. Your Instagram page is amazing. Everybody needs to follow Edwena at My Little Eater. Just so good. So many power packed. Like I'm a big fan of like small steps, right? I can learn one fact and maybe I can, implement that over a couple days rather than a ton of information. And you're just so good at that. So let's sort of do like a little process beginning to end. So let's start with feeding babies. Like, should parents be stressing out about feeding all the right foods to babies age 6 to 12 months, for example?
I wouldn't say stressing out is what I want them to be feeling, but I definitely want them to be cognizant of, what is going into their baby's mouth and, how we can kind of use this time from 6 to 12 months to really set the foundation for healthy eating later on. It really is this critical period. I would even argue between 6 and 9, maybe 10 months of age, is a really, really critical period for flavor training, but also texture training in solids. And it's so, so important. My big thing that I want to let parents know is, it's not about like you have to serve, some 100 different foods, or you have to be like really particular about what happens on day 1, week 1, day 2, week 2. It's more so about giving a lot of variety and giving your baby many, many exposures, lots of practice to try, to experiment, to play with different foods, and obviously to learn how to eat. We know that babies who have been introduced to different flavors and different textures, as much as possible anyway, especially between that 6 and 9 month period, have been shown to have reduced picky eating later on. And we usually, I'll say like in the literature, I know that they start, they say that picky eating would start usually around 18 months, maybe 2 years of age and up. But I see a lot of the finicky behavior starts to happen right around 10 months of age. That's usually when babies start to get a little bit of that like independence is starting to form, a little bit of that awareness, actually a lot of that awareness in terms of, the causal connections. Like when I do this, mom or dad does this. When I cry like this, mom or dad does this. When I throw my food, mom or dad does this. So you start to see those like power dynamics at mealtime start to emerge, and the the want and need to control and test boundaries happens at that time. And what I find is that how you respond then can actually also help with preventing or maybe like preventing picky eating, or maybe even starting to like lead them down a track of more picky eating, depending on how it's handled. But of course, genetics always comes into play as well. So anyway, going back to the food aspect, I would say really it's about offering your baby. A lot of times you hear like, let your baby eat what you eat. And if we're assuming that, you're having different meals, no one wants to eat the same dinner every single day, right? Nobody wants to, well, some people wake up and want to eat the same breakfast every day,
True.
but
Yeah.
for babies, especially in that period, we really want to say, okay, if they had, pancakes one day, that means the next day I'm going to really try and give them eggs, or I'm really going to try and give them, whatever else it is, just to give them a new experience, a new exposure. And that's what I want parents to really focus on. Of course, there's foods that we want to avoid. That list is what it is. And I'm not really going to get into that, but if you think about all the foods that we can give them, it's so vast and it's so varied. Sometimes we're always, we get stuck on like rice cereal, or maybe it's vegetables like carrots, sweet potatoes, zucchini, or whatever for the first many weeks of starting solids, maybe the first month, maybe the first 2 months, and then it's grains, and then it's a little bit of meat. I would rather see from day one, you are giving a little bit of meat, you're giving some vegetables, you're giving some grains, you're giving the fruit, you're doing it all, again, because that's how you want to train your child later in life. So start right from the beginning, set that foundation, set that expectation, so that they are really used to it, and that they learn this is how meal times go, and I can do this just like, mom and dad can.
So that's fascinating. Of course, my oldest is 15, and back then it was try one food, wait for 3 days before trying another, in case, oh my goodness, what if they have an allergy, right? So maybe still do that with highly allergenic foods if you have allergies in your family, but not for like chicken and beets and like,
yes,
don't wait for everything. So super fascinating. I also love that you say, yeah, don't stress about it. However, this is a critical time period. This is critical, and you want variety. I did notice though that as a dietitian, you didn't actually talk about balancing nutrition and the food going into the child. Are you saying that into the belly is not as important as onto the face?
well, yes and no. Okay, there's a lot to explain with that. So let's start with the nutrition side of it. It is, like you said, it's critical that we be cognizant. One of the main reasons outside of exposure and preventing picky eating is getting in iron. So we do know that high iron foods are very important for babies to start getting in around 6 months of age, which is when most babies start solids. And that's because their iron stores are, that they built up in their body when they were in your womb, have actually started to deplete. They start to deplete, I should say, around 6 months, maybe, into 7 months of age. And so that means we have to start getting supplemental forms of iron. Okay. So high iron foods is definitely one of the things that we want to introduce, and we want to introduce a couple times a day at the minimum, in order for them to meet their needs, because their needs are very, very high at this. Okay. At this age. It's actually higher than an adult male's iron needs. It's pretty crazy. So that being said, yes, iron's important. And I would say introducing highly allergenic foods is important, right? We want to, maybe now you have seen, things have changed since I had my son too, 12 years ago. In terms of allergy recommendations, we know now that introducing allergenic foods earlier on and often reduces the risk of developing an allergy later on in life as well. So those are very, very important. But in terms of calories, we know that breast milk and formula are still really giving the majority of the calories that they need at this point. And especially, again, up until 10 months of age, maybe, you don't have to worry about getting in so much calories per meal through food. As long as they're learning how to eat, that will come. And that's going to be a natural transition, a natural progression that happens. And you'll start to see they're going to get more and more calories from food as they become efficient at eating, and as they start to love this eating process. And then, the milk intake will slowly start to go down. And then that's going to kind of naturally enter them into like the world of a toddler eating, 3 meals a day, 2 snacks, all that kind of thing. And milk is more minimal. So I don't want parents stressing about, my baby only ate 1 bite or 2 bites, or they ate at breakfast, but they didn't eat at lunch. That's okay. It's actually expected. It's normal. There is nothing wrong with that. And all we need to do is just keep mealtime pleasant, keep it joyful, and keep on offering, so that, after a few months of this, they will have gotten all those skills and will be getting all the calories they need through food.
Oh, thank you for giving that comfort to parents. I feel like if you think there's 100 things you have to worry about, there's probably like 6, right?
Yes,
Get some highly
you got it.
allergenic foods in there, get some iron, get some variety. Do not worry a single moment about how many bites are actually going in, other than a little bit of iron, right? But just that experimentation. So powerful. Now you mentioned that toddler eating phase. So let's talk about those toddlers. For example, parents, I think, are often really worried about how to get their kid from purees to more textured food. And I do know, I mean, members in our community struggle with 8-year-olds and even teenagers who are still 100% purees. So obviously that step is tricky because it's missed sometime. What advice do you have?
Yes. Okay. So this is something I feel very passionate about, is the advancement in textures. Again, ideally for any new parents out there that are listening and that are going to be starting solids, really important to know that you can make that progression in textures a lot swifter than what's traditionally been done. So traditionally, we've kind of thought of, babies as incapable of chewing, of handling more advanced textures. Maybe we wait until their teeth come in or all their teeth come in, or I don't, there's different people that do different things. But what we actually know is that babies have the innate ability to chew, to gnaw on food, to swallow food of all types, whether that be, finger foods, or even if it's on a spoon, but really textured, lumpy, minced foods. That can happen really right away. Are they going to be, again, efficient day one? No, they're going to spend the first few weeks figuring out what to do. They're going to put it in their mouth. They're going to experience that. They're going to like make a funny face, or maybe they swallow it, or maybe they don't. But that's part of the learning. But what happens is they will start to use those oral motor skills, which are like, the chewing skills, the jaw skill, ability to move their jaw, ability to move their tongue left and right, or in and out of their mouth, or to make a safe swallow. All of those things are or skills that they need to practice. And they can't really practice on that if they're getting, thinking about a thin puree that goes in their mouth. Maybe it like hits the middle of their tongue and then they just swallow, right? And then they do that for weeks, and then they do that for months, and maybe it gets a little thicker, but at the end of the day, there's no chewing required. Or, and so that happens. And then all of a sudden we go, okay, they're a toddler now. Let's introduce real food to them. But at that point, they've developed this habit. They've developed, this kind of liking to those thin or maybe thicker, soft, smooth purees. It's easy. It's palatable. They don't have to work for it. And it's not, it's just a lot more difficult for them to accept that transition at that point. But again, remembering back to what we said, between 6 and 9 months of age, we've got that kind of really critical period where textures especially is going to be like much more accepted. And the ability to use those oral motor skills and work them and practice on them are going to be much more accepted. So that is when ideally we can start introducing those textures. If a parent is saying, well, I didn't do that, and my toddler is struggling right now, that's okay. I just want you to realize that it's not going to be an overnight process to get them there. What we want to start doing with toddlers is it's less about, we have to remember that toddlers now have a being of their own, really. Like they've come into their own, and they have opinions, and they have a way of doing things. And a lot of times we want to make sure toddlers feel like it's their idea, or like they're generating, like we're giving, kind of allowing them to generate that curiosity and interest in doing things themselves, or trying new foods, or trying new textures. So with toddlers, there could be a little bit more involved than just maybe advancing the thickness of a puree, or adding in small lumps, which I do recommend doing little by little. But I also recommend, maybe at that point you're getting your toddler to play in, more lumpy or lumpy textured foods, or maybe it's like actually helping you in the kitchen, things that you teach all the time, to be able to like handle that stuff. And maybe they see you eating it, and then they'll try eating it. So there's a lot of other outside strategies that we could do besides just like, gradually increasing the texture for them. And I think also what's really, really important with toddlers is learning how to set expectations for them, and some healthy boundaries around what is to be expected at meal times, and kind of working within what they're like, meeting them where they are, but also helping them understand that there are, what am I trying to say? Basically, like, no catering, right? We're not going to be giving in to every request and everything that they ask for. We have certain things that we do. Mom chooses the meal or dad chooses the meal. And there's going to be something there that you can eat, but there's also going to be other foods that maybe right now you can't eat, but I'm going to put them on your table, on the plate anyway. And we're going to try, and we're going to play a game with them. We're going to do whatever. So, it can definitely happen, and I don't want parents to feel discouraged. Just understand that it may just take a little bit more time and some other strategies to help get a toddler there.
So good. And I mean, I'm absolutely on the same page with you about raising those expectations, you know, creating clear expectations. This is how dinner time will be. You know, if anyone listening has been to my Raising Adventurous Eaters presentation or our 5-day picky eating challenge, like, yes, exactly. Like, this is what we do. And there's always hope too. Yes. There's always a transition. Yes. Guessing you wouldn't say just thicken the purees, but leave them in the pouch, because then the kids aren't seeing it, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of hidden.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. I think the pouches are great for different circumstances, but sometimes we just become so dependent on them. And again, your toddler really needs that extra exposure. They really need to see, to touch, exactly, you know, to experience it on every level with their 5 senses. And when you have a food that's hidden in a pouch and again just goes straight into their mouth, they're missing out on the smell, and they're missing out on the touch, and they're missing out on all of that experience. So it's really not helping get them to where we want them to be.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, what you say is our convenience culture. Like, it's easier. Once the kid learns it's easier to have purees, that's what they're going to do. And it's the same. Sometimes we parents fall into, you know, negative habits and traps because it's easier. But, you know, leaving the toddler on purees is almost like leaving a kid in diapers and then being really frustrated that they haven't potty trained themselves by age 4, you know, and like, why can't this happen in one day? Well, you know, they've never gotten to experience that. So I love that you just start them really young with all the experiences. I do want to talk a little bit about some of those older picky eaters, because we have a lot of those in our audience. And one thing that parents often say to me is, well, my picky eater only likes bland foods. Why do you think this is? Is there anything they can do about that?
Yes. So once again, toddlers have already developed this love for certain types of food. So if they have only been experiencing bland foods, they're most likely going to want to stay on bland foods in that age bracket. The best thing that you can do, again, so let me talk to the parents maybe who haven't gone through the starting solids phase yet, is introduce the spices early. And I'm talking cumin and coriander and thyme and mint and curry and everything. There's really no restrictions in terms of the herbs, in terms of the spices, in terms of the flavors that they can handle. Now, let's just say, again, we're dealing with a toddler who's already there. They're only wanting the bland foods. My suggestion is to make small tweaks and small changes to things that they already love. So let's say they love plain oatmeal. Okay. And what I would suggest doing is starting to teach them that variety is a thing, even within a food that they already love. So we're going to add a dash of cinnamon into their oatmeal. So it's a food they love. We're just adding a tiny little change, and you can go slow with this. It doesn't have to be like a crazy flavor change, you know, right off the bat, but a little bit of cinnamon. And again, have them add it in. Call it something fun. You know, we're going to add some sprinkles in there. We're going to add some, you know, potion. I don't know. You know, you can make up crazy names for whatever it is and add that in and see how they like it. You can also start doing taste tests with them. So maybe they're not going to have it for their main meal, depending on how picky they are. Maybe in the beginning, they can't even handle that dash of cinnamon. What you can do is set up a taste test outside of mealtime. You know, you can have a little tiny taster cup with a little bit of plain oatmeal. Then we're going to taste it with a little bit of cinnamon. The other one, we're going to put a little bit of vanilla. The other one will put a little bit of, you know, whatever. And let's do a taste test. So there's no obligation. What you always want to let your child know is you don't have to eat it. You don't have to like it. That's totally fine. That's not the point of this. Let's see what happens when we add some of this cinnamon in it. What does it do to it? Does it change the color? Does it change the smell? Does it change the taste of it? How do we know? Okay, well, let's smell it together. Let's take a little lick. Can you take a little lick of that? So it's just this progression, and it's developing a curiosity around it again, where they will feel comfortable. The pressure is off, but they're getting the exposures in, and they're seeing this isn't a scary thing. So that, combined with always trying to find some way to rotate what you offer your child, so it's not the same thing every time, whether that be texture, whether that be flavor, whether it be just the type of meal in general in the menu, and teaching them, again, when it comes to those healthy boundaries, this is the way meal times are. Every day we have something different, or every 2 days, maybe that's better
Sure.
for some families. We have something different. So we don't have oatmeal every day plain, but we can have vanilla oatmeal, or maybe we can add some strawberries to it, or maybe we can do this, or maybe we can do that. So it's it's teaching them what the framework is, and you setting that framework for them and being really consistent about it, and kind of, again, confident and firm about it, and then letting them do their thing within that. So we're not pressuring them within that, but just letting them know, here's how it's going to go. And you have all the control and power within that framework.
Yeah, removing the pressure to eat is huge for our picky eaters. As soon as you try it, parents, you will see how much better that goes, instead of like, you have to eat this. That's never a win situation for anybody. And I feel like you're talking about a little bit of cause and effect. You're saying, all right, parents of babies, parents who are going to have more babies, if you don't want a picky eater, give them exposures to lots of flavors, lots of even spices. That's not something to be afraid of. And if you do have a picky eater that only likes bland foods, could there only be one root cause? No, but perhaps the root cause is lack of development of variety, and you can still grow that. You just have to be a little more intentional, right? You have to be, be a little more thoughtful, and kind of work harder at it than just like giving them all the things, which is what you get to do when you have babies. Congratulations, mamas of babies. You're in a great position to prevent picky eating. That's awesome. So we shouldn't worry about textures. Shouldn't worry about spicy flavors. What about gagging? Should parents worry if their kid gags? Is that a huge red flag?
It's funny, because gagging is what is the number one reason that parents don't introduce a lot of textures to their baby, because they think, my baby's gagging. That's not a good thing. I can't watch my baby gag. That must mean they're in danger, or maybe they're choking. So the most important thing to know is, no, gagging is not a bad thing, and it's nothing to worry about. In fact, it is not just normal, it's required. It's a natural thing. They need to go through this process of gagging on their food in order to learn how to handle that food, right? So if you think about gagging as, again, not just like something that happens, but like, this is a good thing, right? It's that, again, shift in your mindset. When you see that happen, you can start to see like, okay, first of all, let's understand, gagging doesn't even mean they're in danger. It doesn't mean that they're choking. Choking is when the airway is blocked, right? Choking, we know, is a very dangerous situation. They're not making noise. They've got that panic look on their face. Their lips are turning blue. Maybe their face is turning blue. And of course, we have to intervene. Gagging, though, can happen it's a totally separate event. It's not like it's not even like a precursor to choking. A lot of babies choke without even gagging first. So it's a totally separate event. And a gag can happen, if you think about, for young babies, 3 months, 4 months of age, 5 months of age, 6 months of age. That gag reflex is uber sensitive. So you can put, a teether in their mouth. You can put a spoon in their mouth. You can put anything there, and they will probably gag. And that's just a normal thing to say, okay, I'm not really ready to handle anything past this point right now. Okay, cool. 6 months comes along, or around that time, and you start giving your baby food. Maybe it's just, again, a thin puree. By the way, babies can easily gag on thin purees. They can choke on purees too. So it has nothing to do with finger foods or textures versus purees. It's more just having something in their mouth that's new. It's a new experience. And their body's automatically going to have this reflex of a gag, because it's like, okay, well, I don't know how to handle this yet. So let me just make sure it stays up front. Let's handle it up in this area. I'm going to try, that was a new taste, or sorry, taste sometimes it can happen too, but new size or a new texture I haven't handled before. So I'm going to gag. And what'll happen is they'll either spit it out, or they will actually just recover from that gag and continue to chew and swallow. And so when you watch a baby gag, you actually see this amazing thing where they recover so easily. They are happy. They're going in
Mm.
for the next bite. And if you watch that independently, you're like, that wasn't a bad thing for them. What starts to happen is we panic and we get anxious and we get scared and we act like it's a bad thing. So we're like, oh my God, no, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? And it starts to teach the baby gagging is bad, right?
Mm.
So when it's happening to them, they start to think, again, I'm not saying once or twice, I'm talking a little bit more over a little bit longer of a period. They start to think, this must not be good, what's happening, I should react, this I should panic, this food is not for me, I can't do this. So if anything, I say try and stay neutral. Or if for those parents who really are like, no, I cannot do that, that is still too scary for me, I totally understand. It can trigger a lot of parents. So what you can try and do is actually adopt that role of being a cheerleader. So you need to actively do something. You got this pent up energy. You got to do something. Clap. Give your baby that encouragement. Say, good job. Oh my goodness. Look at that gag. Come on, gag it out. You can do it. Get it. Oh, look at how good you did. You spit that right out. That kind of thing. So you're really showing them it's a good thing. And you can act, you could do something, but it's not going to be anything that's going to hold them back and make them scared of that whole process, because it really is so necessary. And I will tell you that gagging, the more practice you give it, again, especially earlier on, the more that gag reflex is going to move further and further back.
Mm.
The body's going to get more confident. They're going to know, I know how to handle this. I don't need to gag at this point, or whatever it is. And that is going to diminish completely. Well, significantly by 9 to 10 months of age. You're not going to really see that to being a big thing anymore when they've gotten that practice early on.
Oh, so many truth bombs. You guys, Edwena is a pro. She knows her stuff, right? So, I mean, we need a mental shift that gagging is a safety reflex. And I love that. The more you do it, the further back it goes. Worrying about gagging after what you just explained, it's not choking, would be almost as silly as watching your child learn how to walk and worrying if they stumble at all, right? And catching them every stinking time. They're going to not learn how to catch themselves. There's that whole beautiful analogy on struggle and the value of struggle with if someone helps a butterfly out of its chrysalis, the butterfly dies, because the wings have not had that struggle, right, to get out of the chrysalis. And the chrysalis sort of, like, I think, squeezes all the extra moisture off the wings and makes them strong. We want strong kids.
Yes.
We want strong eaters, right? And when we talk about our tweens and our teens, we always talk about the value of learning from failure, right?
Yes.
The value of letting them try and take risks. And that's what it looks like with the toddler in the high chair, is cheering on the gag. My mind is blown. So many good truth bombs. Now, what about the parents whose 2-year-olds or 3-year-old? Because you said that should kind of phase out by 9 or 10 months. And I thought, well, what about the 2-year-olds, the 5-year-olds, the 8-year-olds who are still having gagging issues? Is it a similar thing going on there, or is there something different? Like, what do parents do?
Well, I mean, it could be at that point again. So we could see that toddlers are gagging because, again, lack of exposure.
Sure.
Maybe they have learned it to be a reflex to something they don't like. But it could also be, some children have like these sensory aversions. They get overly sensitive to either the taste or smell or whatever of a food, touch of a food, and it stimulates, again, very, very sensitive gag reflex. I still want to teach the toddler. Actually, there's a colleague of mine, Melanie Potok. I don't know if you know her. She's
We have an interview with her too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
She's amazing. And she, said kind of the same thing with your chrysalis example, the butterfly. It's like, if your child is scared of the water, I think it was something to do with swimming or whatever it was. I think it was like teaching your child to swim. It's really about, we can't forever shelter them, and we can't forever feed their anxiety, because it is anxious feelings. And it's not something that I'm saying we're just going to be like, too bad, here you go, and just kind of not sympathize with it. But I think it's still challenging them and telling them it's okay. Hey, that was a gag. Again, I think it's the same principle, really. It's okay that happened. You're going to move at a slower pace, at a pace that they can handle. And that's going to be different for this child than it is for the other child, than it is for the next child. But you're going to kind of help them feel like I'm here and you're safe. And that was a gag, and that's going to happen sometimes. You know what I mean? But but just kind of encouraging them to experience it, because I think through that experience, that's in a really calm, positive manner, it will come. Of course, there's tons of other feeding therapy strategies that go along with this, but just this one snippet, it will come that they will start to overcome this, right? And just understanding this is something that will take a little bit more time, maybe, and that requires a little bit more work in the toddler phase, but 100% can be overcome. And it really is just about making them feel like this is okay.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And it's good as parents to say, okay, this is not really a developmentally appropriate challenge. Therefore, something's going on, especially like an 8-year-old, right? Still gagging. So we got to figure out the root cause. Is it just that they sort of skipped that step in baby and toddler feeding, and we need to sort of reverse it? I know a lot of OTs, when kids have maybe some, postural or what's the right coordination issues, they send them back to crawling, and that's, they have to crawl in order to kind of relearn. So I can see that is kind of a root cause, but I'm glad that you also mentioned, sensory processing. And Melanie Fotok, we have a couple of different interviews that we'll link to in our show notes for sure. And so I think as parents, if we can really examine some of those root causes, that can develop the problem solving situation, but always possible, always possible. Now, let's talk about kids in the kitchen, because of course, that's my passion. And I really believe that it's instrumental in kids learning to eat better. How do you see kids being involved with their food as part of this process of learning to eat, especially if we're thinking about babies and toddlers? Because that freaks parents out. People will ask me, well, Katie, how young can my kids start? And I know they're thinking like, oh, she'll probably say kindergarten. And when I say 2 or maybe earlier, they kind of go, oh, what? So what do you think? Should kids get in the kitchen really early?
1,000,000%.
Yay.
I am so all about that too. So I would say, you know what, before they can even really do anything, just bring them into the kitchen. So pull their high chair up right up to the counter when you're doing something, or even if you don't want them grabbing something, that's fine. Pull them up next to you though, and let them see what you're doing and talk them through it, and let them see, oh, this is what happens in the kitchen. And we're preparing the food that's about to go on the table that you're going to eat. And just that experience, I'm telling you, from early on, I have seen makes a really big difference. And then of course, 18 months of age, maybe even earlier, like you can give them something, just make them feel like they're doing something. They don't have to be really helping. I mean, we know that's not really going to happen anyway. It's more about, it feels like they're helping and they're participating in this whole process. And what I have found with my clients is I always see they come back, they say they want it, and with my kids too, they want to eat it, or at the very least try it, because they feel proud of what they did. They really have this sense of accomplishment. They could have struggled, maybe like sometimes again, making a smoothie and putting in that spinach was like a very difficult process for them. They didn't even want to touch that spinach. And they were like, ew, whatever. They put that in, they blended it out, whatever, that's all good. But when it comes to serving it, all of a sudden they feel like, I want to try it though. It's mine. And they feel proud and they come and say, Dad or Mom, look what I made. Like, look what I did. I have seen, like, from that point alone, it brings such a change. But of course, if we think about, toddlers who have a difficult time experiencing food at the table, maybe they have negative connotations with mealtime already. It's just a bad space. A lot of kids can't even handle, the idea of the food being on their plate, or even some kids can't handle the idea of food being placed in the center of the table. That's okay. If we want to get them again away from that environment and start somewhere like in the kitchen, or maybe in the garden, or maybe wherever, coloring pages, anything, to get them experiencing and exposing them to those foods without the pressure, that negative association around it, that's where you start. And that is where I've seen, again, a lot of improvement. You start there, and then you can move here, and then you can move here, and then you can move here. So you have all these steps to eating, right? That bring you closer and closer to the eventual goal of actually swallowing and consuming food for calories. So I think it's a wonderful place. And I think it's so hard. I know it is so hard, sometimes busy parents, and the idea of like the mess, and the idea of like, oh, that's going to slow me down. I understand that. And I know you understand that, but we also know that like even the small things, I would never underestimate them as being valuable. You may not see it happen, right then and there as like this crazy change that happened, but with consistency and with that positive environment, you're going to see a lot of change happen over some time.
And it's so worth it. I mean, we all want to raise kids who are successful and who have like love in their lives, right? And like they're going to eat 3 times a day. Like whether we believe it or not, right now, you want to raise good eaters. And so sometimes I know as parents, it just feels like one more thing. I don't want to take my kids to the store. I don't want to get them in the garden. I don't want to figure all that out. Coloring pages. Whew, I got a stack a foot high of coloring pages, I mean, and I'm being very honest here because I hear the one more thing, but first of all, these are, we are going to spend time with our kids regardless, right? And this is so important, helping them be good eaters, especially if you've got a child who's sort of on a trajectory where they're, maybe seeming a little picky or selective, or they're seeming to like have those negative associations with food or the dinner table. The best day to stop that and put the curb on it is today.
Yes.
Right. It starts today, and we are bound to raise healthy eaters. So good. Edwena, I hope you don't mind if I have you back for a part 2, because I'm looking at some of the questions I have left, and it's literally another interview where we're going to talk about hot button issues like hunger and fullness, the dreaded snack question and portion size, the dessert and sweets question. I mean, these are just, and then the bedtime snacks. Like, I feel like that's like a totally separate interview. So you will be back, my friend. But for today, we talked about such a wonderful progression of the babies, the toddlers, the exposure, the variety, some strategies to sort of fix or reverse course on maybe some bad habits that older kids have. Fascinating, fabulous, very practical. Parents, Edwena Kennedy is definitely a pro. You got to learn more from her. But that was also a lot. So at the end here, I really like to leave parents with one practical step. So what would you say one thing parents can do today where they'll see a positive reinforcement for themselves, right? Well, I did something good.
Yes. I think the most valuable thing that a parent can start with is adopting that. So we call it the division of responsibility. It's basically this foundational theory. So many of us talk about it, but it's so important. Essentially, it's the roles of a parent at mealtime and the roles of a child at mealtime. And what it does is it fosters a healthy relationship with food. It fosters trust in the eating environment. And it really is the foundational step to preventing all the other issues and managing all the other issues before you can get into this little tweak and this little strategy and this little tactic. You've got to get this down. So what this theory says is that the parents are responsible for what is served, when it is served, and where it is served. Okay, so we're choosing all the meals, we're choosing what points throughout the day we're giving it, and we're choosing where it's being served. Is it at the table today? Is it in the family room today, on the floor? Are we gonna have a picnic? Whatever. That is the parents' realm, their control. The child is the one who's choosing if they want to eat and how much they want to eat from what we've provided them. And it sounds so simple. It's so simple. However, it's really hard to implement. So I would love parents to start practicing, actually even just start identifying where, at what points, during mealtime, do I cross that line? Am I at any point trying to dictate to my child how much they should be eating? Right. Or if they should be eating something, And at the same time, is my child crossing into my realm? Do they dictate what should be served? And maybe they're not, they're obviously not in the kitchen preparing things, but they dictate by maybe asking for things and we give it to them, right? So the catering, or maybe we are meal planning with only them in mind, right? Those are ways that they're dictating really what should be served. When should it be served? Are they the ones asking for a snack or a meal at this time or that time when it's not really a planned snack or meal time? Am I giving into that? Am I letting them step into my role? And again, where are they running all around? Do they want to eat in the playroom? Do they want to eat in front of the TV? Do they want to eat wherever it is? Let me start with that structure. And again, this is a lot. There's a lot to go into this with this theory. It's not, easy, like I said, to implement, but I just think even trying to identify where could things maybe be starting to crisscross, I think is a wonderful first step to being able to move forward and to know what areas you might want to start tackling first.
So well said. I mean, you have to have the foundation. You can't fix, the spark plug on a car engine if the entire, what is it even called? Like the gear system.
I don't know anything about cars.
If it's out of gas, right? Like, okay, that was a really bad choice for an analogy, Katie. Silly. But yeah, you can't make a tweak on something if the foundation isn't solid. And so well done, making it practical. Look for a gap. There's 5 rules. And if you or your children are kind of missing one of those, likely it's something that drives you crazy. Mm-hmm. That's an easy way to find a gap, because probably if there's crossing over, it's something that doesn't feel good. And so what a great first practical step is, like, where is somewhere that's broken, and try to fix it. Begin to identify, begin to shift your mindset. At the very least, observe your day and go, oh, I did it. I did that
exactly.
wrong.
And no shame or judgment. Yeah, no shame or judgment around it. It really is. Every one of us do it. Like, I catch myself doing it at different times, and even the best of my clients do it at different times. It's all about, correcting and identifying. First thing, always just identifying with compassion. Oh yeah, I did do that yesterday. Oh yeah, this did happen, and I noticed this happens when I am busy, or when my child didn't eat, or whatever, just figuring out when and how and why, what are the circumstances under this. And again, being compassionate about it is what you need to do. And so please don't feel like you've done horribly wrong if you catch this, because you will catch this, and I catch this with myself all the time. But it's the best exercise that you can do to always be advancing and improving your eating strategy or feeding strategies.
Yes. Awesome. Approach with curiosity and how can we improve, right? We always want to improve as parents. Oh my goodness, Edwena Kennedy, so much power-packed information in this interview. I just loved it. We will send people over to you. Say your Instagram handle, because that's a really easy place to find you.
Yes, it's at My Little Eater.
At My Little Eater. I knew that. I just didn't want to get it wrong. But so good. And especially families, if you have friends with toddlers, friends with babies, friends who are trying to conceive, get them over to Edwena, because they need it for sure, even maybe more than you do. So thank you again, Edwena. We will be back next week with another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector, connecting you who really, really want to raise healthy kids with the experts who have the information you need. I'm Katie Kimball for Kids Cook Real Food.